teeth, so it's enforceable. It's something you can do or sink your teeth in, and even, well, I want to say force, but maybe that's too strong a word. You can really encourage a transparent government. We have the tools for that. We don't have to let crooked or corrupt public officials run a game on us. We don't. We have the tools. So one of the tools in the state of Washington is that the concept of environmental justice has really been embraced by the state of Washington. This allows low-income people to have a voice. It allows us to not be excluded. When I showed up at the Parks Commission for the first time, it was because it was out of desperation. I had to tell them what at least one homeless person looked like, and that a homeless person can have a voice, and that a homeless person could even teach them something. And that what that something was this idea of green space equity. All these parks in America are traditionally and legally open public spaces. They are open to the homeless, no matter what anyone tells you. There is even a First Amendment aspect to gathering in the park with your comrades who are homeless, right? So when we discovered that the outdated word vagrant was routinely used by our police department, and it was so routinely used in the Parks Commission, in the Parks Administration, that they literally inserted it into the Parks Plan. They call it the PROS Plan. They inserted the word vagrant. They asked the public in a survey, is the reason why you like or don't like our parks because of the vagrant problem? And then they cited two particular parks, and they said, the vagrants are monopolizing our public restrooms.
Wow.
It's a derogatory word, similar to the N-word or the R-word.
Absolutely. So I internally, I blew a
in the 70s?
70s.
Wow.
So we tried to complain that, well, there's a whole long story behind Anna Mockler's Hose the Homeless moment. So unless you want to bring it up, I'll bypass it now, because that's its own show.
Yeah, we bypass it.
So I went to the Parks Commission. I explained to them that I spent a winter freezing with a group of homeless people, that it kind of crept up on me that I grew to love them. And in fact, they are still kind of my family, because I live with them in my head. And I had to leave them. And there was one woman that I really wanted to help before I left, and I failed. So when I went to the Parks Commission, I told them, you guys get fortunes in funding from the Recreation Conservation Office. A fortune. It's the same thing with ecology, giving the city a massive amount of money to keep the waters clean, right? So this city depends on state funding. So we call it green space equity. Because parks are inherently for the public, we cannot, as a society, tolerate, and it is actually in the law, you cannot tolerate someone proposing to deter the low income from parks. It's repugnant in law. So I went them and I told them, you can't do that. Green space equity requires that if you're going to get funding from the RCO, you cannot be calling the homeless vagrants. And then I told them about the Supreme Court case of Papa Christou. And what Papa Christou did was it legally got rid of the term vagrant. It recognized that this was inherently unconstitutional. It was a targeting device where police departments would use it to target the undesirables of society. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of Papa Christou, which I still kind of fanboy over it, is it's cited to American poets, to American philosophers who were often wanderers. They were in fact vagrants. The court said you could consider them vagrants. They walk around in the woods, they're unemployed. So the idea of using vagrants as a way to smear people who are unconventional, and in America, if you have no money, I guess you're unconventional. The court made sure to get rid of that term as a viable legal mechanism criminalize people. So, and that was in 1972. So I told the Parks Commission this. You really need to stop calling the homeless vagrant. If you create a parks plan, and you have vagrant in it, and you're indoctrinating the public to use the word vagrant, if that is what you're doing, that is something so repugnant to the idea of being an American that it's been gotten rid of by the Supreme Court, a century ago, half a century ago. It should be a century ago.
It should be.
So in 1972, the court outlawed that term as something any police department should be using. So do you know what happened? I looked it up after Jane Rebolowski assured the public in December of 2025 that the Parks Commission was going to fix their plan and stop using the word vagrant. I went back in their records. I did a public record request. And after Jane said that, after Tim Barker said he fixed that problem, they were still using the word vagrant in 2026 after we complained. They still included it in their survey to the public. So, and what this is indicative of is the problem with what we saw at the Planning Commission in July. The hatred of the poor, the bigotry against poverty, is a problem as visceral and as problematic as racism, as any kind of ism you can think of. There's a Spanish philosopher, she came up with the term aporophobia, and this is the same thing as, I believe, as racism. And if we want to be a growing society, a just society, and by the way, we never hear the word justice at Norm Dix. We never hear that damn word from any of the legal people there. Why? Because it's inconvenient. Once you use the word justice, it means they're going to have to work. Justice takes work. So when they start calling the homeless bums or hobos or vagrants at the Planning Commission or at the Parks Commission, there is a societal problem. And you know how you fix that? You fix that by simply applying your basic American law. Equal protection, fairness, right? Green space equity. These are all real things. These are things that are tangible and objective. They don't need to die, and really they shouldn't die. They actually get money by pretending to be about green space equity. They get money by pretending they're about justice. They get money from the state by pretending they care about the environment. They get a fortune putting up these presentations where they feature the low income. They talk about the low income, and then the low income never sees the benefit of the funding they're getting from the state. We saw that with Quincy Square. Yeah. The seed money for Quincy Square, Wesley Larson's project and his B-flats, that first initial injection of public money came from HUD CDBG funds. So that was the seed money for Wesley Larson's B-flats apartments. That was the seed money for Quincy Square. And they have it in writing, promises that affordable housing will be generated from the B-flats and from Quincy Square. For Quincy Square, they actually had it on paper. I believe it was 284 or 294 affordable units. So that was the seed money for Quincy Square and in innumerable projects in the city, including the parks. So what we're seeing now is hyper-gentrification, is monomania. Some of the people, in fact, the leaders of the sabotage of the shelter, they are extremely privileged. These are college professors, artists, right? They have very aesthetic looking social media, and yet they are completely shameless. They'll say, we don't mean to be dehumanizing. There's nothing dehumanizing about what we have to say, but the planning, it's so poor, it's so this. In fact, they are bigots. They are really filled with hate, and they are encouraging, inciting irrationality. All the studies, you can go to the mayor's own consultant. They have an entire page worth of citations to studies that say where there is a shelter, the crime rate goes down. So what we are looking at is the incitement and the encouragement of irrationality.
Say that again. Where there's a shelter, what?
The crime rate goes down.
There's studies on that.
Yes, there's an entire list.
The city presents it?
Yeah. citation
site
after
got changed.
citation.
Until the site got changed to Harrison Heights.
Wow.
What they say is that in the immediate area of the shelter, crime goes down.
Wow.
In the general area of the shelter, crime goes down.
Wow.
What Joe Crane and the BHA have proposed is a solution to what these people are complaining about.
Yeah, huge.
This is the fix. They complain of these extreme cases, right?
Yep.
Homeless people wandering the street, really extreme cases.
Jose, you weren't here at the time. That's what they told us when we were trying to get the porta potties down there.
Yep.
They're gonna burn them. There's gonna be, like I say, the R word is gonna happen in there. There's gonna be rampant drug use. There's gonna be all those things. We had those porta potties there for 3 months, and we didn't have any of those things. The county let us use them. We paid for them. We maintained them. We gave them back to the county just as we found them. Not a problem. Didn't have those
and
issues.
there were some weird smear campaigns that were going on. And I did contact people who made comments at a meeting. I think Jennifer
yep.
had a meeting, and there were some comments there by people saying like, oh, we found all these needles and we found this. And I thought, what are you talking about? If you remember, I was the one, unfortunately, because I'm a nurse maybe, that always gets the dirty job. And I was the one like going down there and assist and actually cleaning them before the porta potties got there. The sharps weren't an issue, sadly, because if people were doing drugs, there's a lot less hypodermic use, and it's a lot more inhalation drugs nowadays. So it was just like all of this rampant bad information by people who are so confident in what they're saying, but it's like absolutely untrue. And you just hear those voices, which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Yep.
So unfortunate.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I just wanted to put that piece in there, Jose.
If the people, I feel like the developers, they're very privileged, wealthy. There's a lot of fear as well, even though he's on his website, it says he's a sensei, very strong man. But the fact that he's scared of me or just says he is, and he needs security because of us. And the fact that there's so much pushback, I just wish they were listening to this and would understand that we're actually going to be helping them as well, because the blight that they talk about would be decreased. And the people who want to continue doing criminal acts, for example, those people could so much easily be handled by the police department than right now when every single one of them is breaking the
Right.
law.
They're going to stand out, right?
Yeah, they'll stand out. And also people like Don Michelle or Jocelyn or outreach groups, the amount of clients they have will be so narrowed down that they can target in on them and get them to the places they need, instead of being bombarded by all of these families who are much, just looking for a meal or clothes. We deal with those people first because they're easier to solve, I guess. So if we could just get the large mass of them into a shelter and then into these affordable next steps, which is like the pallets and then the affordable housing apartments, that would decrease our problems, and it would save us a ton of money.
And no group wants to be painted with the broad brush, right? The police don't want to be painted that way, right?
No.
It's like, hey, one bad apple spoils the bunch, right?
Yes.
There are good cops, or there's one bad cop. Doesn't make all cops bad, right? So there's some bad actors in the unhoused element
in my neighborhood
that are in there,
everywhere,
right?
And people talk about sex offenders, or they keep bringing that up because it's a very horrible, disturbing thing. And so people always bring it up to try to counter homeless shelters. But just so you know, there are websites you can go to, type in your address, and it tells you every sex offender that's already in our neighborhoods right now. And in America, you do your time and then you're entered back into society. So that's not a good talking point to counter a homeless shelter.
Well, and not only that, but whether you like it or not, you also have to address the issue. You can't not address it, right? They're going to exist somewhere. So you're going to have to do something. Just the bottom line.
I have to tell you, at that July Planning Commission, sitting there, I usually like to just sit there and listen before I say something, because sometimes I get an idea or I can respond to something, even though that minuscule amount of time is ridiculous. So, and that was a mistake this time, because I sat through the whole hearing, and it was like a tsunami of ignorance and hate. and it just depressed the hell out of me. I felt crushed. At one time, I started to get emotional. It was horrible. And what I didn't realize was that one of the young moms who had gone to the parks hearing, we went to the city council in December 2025 to protest the cross plan, where they talk about the vagrant. I did a legal brief. I talked about Papa Cristo, how that's illegal. I did the whole shebang, right? I went Jose as a paralegal. And two moms with children showed up there. Really, why would they do that? To show them that we're human.
Mm-hmm.
We are not a name. We are actually more human than we are homeless. That term homeless defines your economic status on one day, right?
Mm-hmm.
It could mean almost anything. The only thing it really means in substance is that you don't have a house to live in. So it could literally be a millionaire on his worst possible day. Who knows? He got hurt and crippled. He doesn't have a brain now, and he's out on the street. Who knows? It is such a non-descriptive term. So these young moms showed up at that hearing to basically say, we're homeless, we're not vagrants, we're not criminals. And I remember Sarah saying, so remember that when you're making your plans, right?
Mm.
And when she said that, what was happening is that Sam Westgroup and Denise Fry, they were making their plans for Harrison Heights, right?
Yeah.
So the problem with what's going on is this unleashing of bigotry and hate. There's no thought process. So as I'm sitting there on that July Planning Commission meeting with this fuselage, this tsunami of hate, I was in the middle of just ignorance and irrationality. None of the people who were against the shelter were proposing solutions. They just wanted poor people, the poverty-stricken people, to disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So, it just kept cropping into my head as these comments kept coming forward. I would think, do you want them to levitate and float up in the air into the heavens and disappear? Do you want death squads? Where are people supposed to go? We have to exist. No one was actually talking about a solution. And then poor Joe Crane. The BHA guys are exhausted. And they've been turned around in so many directions. So Joe Crane got up there. He basically said, I'm the author of this plan, and I actually have a plan. This was the plan. That plan, and I saw his presentation at a Jane Revelowski town hall. Mm-hmm. And so it is a legit plan. It was multifaceted. It would address the exact complaints that these people had. The exact complaints. And because it was flexible and multifaceted, and it would involve personnel who provide that wraparound support, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would address every single problem we saw. And you know what? There is a small army of volunteers that once took care of the tent communities on MLK and Broadway, who would step forward and probably patrol the freaking streets. If they saw someone in a crisis, there would be no problem addressing that poor person in a crisis and getting him help like immediately. You know why? Because everyone will be in one place where we could take care of our own, right? This soldier's idea of leave no one behind, that is a typical American, ideal. I don't know why for the most vulnerable, it is okay to just take a big fat crap on people, to smear them, and then hope that they somehow disappear. It was just complete irrationality. It was very depressing. And then getting back to the two moms who showed up at the pros plan hearing, mm-hmm. I didn't know it because I'm kind of stiff. I don't look behind me. I didn't realize that one of the moms was seated behind me, who showed up at the Parks Commission, until after I got up and she tapped me, and it was one of the moms of young children who showed up at this the pros plan meeting, where we were protesting how they were dehumanizing the homeless by wanting to deter them from the parks and by calling them stigmatizing, criminalizing names. So I turned around and the poor girl is stricken. She has been re-traumatized, and she's telling me, I don't know why they're talking like, I can't believe it. And I looked at her and I just felt so so helpless because there was very little I could do. So I tried the poor version of a Jocelyn hug because no one's like Jocelyn, right?
Correct.
No one can match Jocelyn.
Facts.
So we gave her a hug, and I just felt so harmless. So after she left, after we all left, I looked at some of that hearing, and the poor girl is seated behind me, and I'm looking at her face, and this is re-trauma. She is absolutely stricken at what she's hearing. This ton of hatred that's completely irrational. It is untethered from reality.
Yeah.
They're making regular humans who could be children, who could be people who have wounds, right? Could be people who have cognitive problems. I know a lady that I've eaten meals with who is a survivor of a car wreck. So she has like a broken spine and cervix. She can't hold her head up right. But her mentally, she's completely fine.
Cervical.
Yeah. So we have disabled people out there. We have people who, if they suddenly showed up at our door, we would not dream to treat them badly because we don't know they're homeless, right? So these people are demonizing people they don't know, people who could be anyone, and they're demonizing them, and they want them to disappear. And the poor girl behind me, I mean, re-traumatized, like way worse than me, right? I was sickened. By the time I got out of there, I was actually nauseous.
Wow.
See, this is what I'm saying when we are allowing people to make comments that in other professions we would never allow someone to walk into an OR and say, no, that's not what's really going on. We would say, get out of here. You have no idea what you're talking about. Stop spreading misinformation. You're going to kill people. But instead, we let these people come in out of nowhere using all their fear-based, harebrained ideas that are not based in any facts. And we allow them to, poison the minds of everyone else. And it's just unheard of. Like if we wanted to repair like a bridge, we would hire experts to do it. And if these people came along and says, you're doing it wrong, you've studied bridges your whole life, but that's not how you do it, we would tell them to get out of town, get out of our way. You're causing more harm.
Yes.
And that's what NIMBYs do, is they're causing more harm. And I want to welcome them to learn and to work on the front lines with us, but they've never once reached out. And I've reached out consistently because I feel as a medical provider, a registered nurse, that we have to stand up and say, no, these people have issues that we know how to solve. And what you're saying is absolutely never going to help. And it's only going to increase their traumatic experiences, like you just said.
And it's shocking, and it's everything, from COVID with, Don Michelle, talking about having the stroke patient being dropped off from the hospital. And, again, talking about all the folks that you and Kelsey and Dawn, treating down on the block. And when you see it, I'm just down there cooking, and it's just, I'm not treating wounds and just triaging folks. It's like, wow, man. I mean, it's just hard enough if you're in perfect health.
Yes.
But dealing with the infirmities, oh man,
that are all preventable, and we have a solution for all of that.
Yeah.
But people need to get out of our way.
Yeah.
And there has to be some political buy-in.
Or watching wounds that just can't heal because they're out in the elements, or they can't get the adequate treatment.
And people keep blaming them. That's the problem. Is it's so easy to walk away. Oh, it's their fault because they did this. It's okay. Well, the guy that had the seizure, do you say, oh, it's his fault that his brain was born that way? That he has a malformation in his brain that causes seizures. So, screw you, deal with it. No, we don't treat other people with medical conditions that way. But people with conditions, for some reason, in this population, it's become normal to treat them like this. And there's even a child, like their token child that they bring to the meeting to speak against homeless. And his friends are some of his friends are probably homeless. Yeah. How dare they do that to a child? That's my opinion.
I have a story. I try to interject imagery of actual humans that are called homeless. And when I was in, I call it Trump land because Central Illinois, very Trumpy. Well, I used to go to the library during my lunch to get away from the office. and it became clear that there was a homeless community that would spend time there. Near the library, not right next door, but near, like a block away, was a facility like the Salvation Army, but it was a different church. Well, they had services for the homeless, including limited shelter for overnight. So I'd hang out at the library, take my laptop, that way I could be away from the boss, but still do stuff. And so I got to know some of the regulars who were homeless. And there was one guy who was very quiet. And I remember he wore an Army field jacket. So over 6 months, this was a habit of mine, because I typically would eat a light lunch while I'm working. And this guy who was very quiet would be seated at a table and do his thing, not usually talking to anyone. But right next to this library was a thrift store. And the thrift store would have like older baked goods right by the door. So if you go to the thrift store and you needed something to eat, the baked goods would be right there. And what I saw over like 6 months was basically this regular at the library. He slowly turned, he was starving. Over 6 months, I saw this guy who was pretty solid looking just starve in front of my eyes. And he was very quiet, always polite to people around him. His clothing was always clean, and even pressed, like he had a super neat look, which I have never achieved. So, we would nod to each other, but just over 6 months, he basically turned into a skeleton. Even though there was this thrift store like outlet, this kind of lifeline, that the free stuff right by the door. So over 6 months, and I wanted to like help him, but I didn't know how, or I didn't want to embarrass him. So at the end of this lunch hour, I